Alright guys, SP Atsumu Miya should be the next character coming up on Global, so let's take a look at his kit today. Now, he's obviously a fan favorite character. I know a lot of people were disappointed about his UR version, but his SP version is actually really good, so let's talk about exactly why he's so good. And also at the end of the video, I'm going to give my own opinions on whether or not you should be summoning for him. So starting off with his skill 1, he will be increasing his set and serve stat. That's basically his skill 2 and skill 4, so it kind of makes sense there. And then at the start of each turn, for your players with awareness less than 30%, they're going to get this thing called flexible adaptation, and it will increase their attack and defense technique by 10%. Now, this is somewhat similar to the UR version of Atsumu Miya, which is basically this whole synergy on not relying on crit. However, in the case of Atsumu Miya, the SP version of Atsumu Miya, it's actually going to be a lot more relaxed. And the reason for this, first of all, it don't have to be 0. You actually have a 30% threshold now, which is actually quite nice. It builds up quite a bit bigger of a buffer in terms of, like, for example, you're messing up with your potential substats or like messing around with your memories, etc. You can probably still comfortably reach less than 30% as long as you're not actively trying to do a crit build. So that part by itself is already quite nice. And then the other thing is that this is only checked at the start of each turn, which is also really nice because a lot of characters actually only get a huge awareness buff during the middle of that rally. So a good example, for example, could be SP Hinata, V1 version of SP Hinata. He is going to get an awareness buff at the point of spiking after a critical receipt. And what that basically means is at the start of turn, he may have this buff available, but it's not actually being applied. So his awareness is actually going to be less than 30% for sure. It's only at the point of actually spiking, he wouldn't be able to actually use up this awareness buff to guarantee a crit. So as a result, he will still be able to benefit from this. And this will also be in a similar sense to, for example, SP Hoshimi Mikura in the future, who only get a massive awareness buff at the time of spiking. So all of those characters, he only get awareness buff in the middle of the match rather than at the start of turn. They will all be able to enjoy this. So that's kind of why, unlike the UR version of Atsumu Miya, who's a bit awkward to play around with a non-crit condition, SP version of Atsumu Miya is actually going to be a lot more flexible and relaxed in terms of those conditions you have to satisfy. Okay. Next, we'll move on to his skill 2. This is a surfing skill, once again, very similar to his UR version, but this is a skill 2 rather than ultimate skill, so skill multiplier will be lower, but it does have very nice effect. So the very first time you use it, the enemy cannot use a spike ultimate. Second time you use it, the enemy cannot use a receive ultimate. I believe all of them have a separate cooldown of 6 necrosing, and basically what that means is that even if you get into a situation where you're able to win the rally very quickly after yourself, you may actually literally be able to rotate them around between those two skills constantly. Okay, so very good surfing effects. Next up, we have skill 3. At the start of each turn, you will be increasing your set stat until your next ball touch. So basically, this is essentially just buffing up Atsumu Miya's first set of each rally. And then the next thing is that when he uses his ultimate time, your players with this condition, which basically requires you to have less than 30% awareness, now they're going to get an additional attack technique of 20% and defense technique of 15%. This will last for a whole rally, which is quite nice because what that basically means is that even though you only trigger this condition when you use your ultimate set, however, let's say if for some reason the rally goes on very long, your spike will still be able to enjoy it for the rest of your this set as well. Okay, so that is basically quite nice in the sense that you don't have to basically use Atsumu Miya every single time to actually personally use his ultimate for your team to get this additional buff. You just need to use it at least once per rally to actually enjoy that for the rest of that rally. And then the other thing is that when he actually uses his ultimate, if the spiker's attack technique is less than 60, then it can also be if the attack technique is more than 60, then it can also be a guaranteed crit as well. Now, this is obviously nice to compensate for the fact that normally to get this, your awareness has to be less than 30, which make it difficult to crit. However, if you're actually able to get your attack technique more than 60, then it really doesn't matter how low your awareness is, you are still able to do a critical spike. Now, personally, I think attack technique of 60%, that's actually quite tough to reach because even from Atsumu Miya's own kit, you only get 10% here, you get another 20% here, so that's 30%. Let's assume you also have a slot 6 main stat of attack technique. That's going to be another 15%. So in total, that's still only 45%. So in order for your teammates to actually reach 60% attack technique or more, you pretty much have to bring another attack technique buffer onto your team as well. For example, SP Hiragami in the future, or alternatively, you can also bring SP Atsumu Miya, who would then have bonus skills in order to increase your attack technique. Okay, so that's just something for you guys to bear in mind. Do not assume this is going to be very easy to reach with Atsumu Miya by himself. Lastly, for his ultimate attack skill 4, he will do a set ultimate, and also when his own attack technique is not less than 40, it will be guaranteed to be crit. Now 40 is actually quite easy to reach because, like I said earlier, he himself can already give 30%, and if you just have a slot 6 main stat, you can easily go with 40%. So this part at least is easy to reach. The only one which can be tricky is going to be this section of his skill tree. Okay. Now moving on to his skill resonance. His skill resonance 2 is insanely strong, which is basically saying that at the start of each turn, once again, your awareness less than 30% would also have their ultimate cooldown reduced by 2 net crossing. Reducing cooldown by 2 net crossing or any kind of cooldown reduction is always an amazing skill in this game. So for this reason, his skill resonance 2 to me is very, very important if you do want to plan to play him. It's kind of what makes him different to all of the other setters out there. It's kind of like his unique selling point. And then the other thing is that when your players cast set ultimate, what's going to happen is the set power will increase, and also your own setting cooldown will reduce by 1 net crossing. And what that essentially means is that if you have another character with a set ultimate on your team, what Asuna Miya can effectively do is to do his own set ultimate once every turn. So that is also quite positive as well. But the main selling point for his skill range is really this cooldown reduction. Okay, this is very, very important. Then the next thing is going to be his skill range 4. Now, when he's actually on the court, your on-court players with attack technique greater than 40 will have attack techniques increased by further 35. Now, this is very important if you decide to play Atsumu by himself for some reason. For example, you don't want to play Osamu Miya or don't want to bring another attack technique buffer such as Hiragami, because like I said earlier, it's going to be quite easy for yourself to reach more than 40% attack technique. However, to reach this threshold of 60%, that's actually somewhat difficult. However, if you have a skill rating 4, as long as you are able to reach 40%, which I say is easy, you're then able to bump it up by another 35, which then immediately makes sure you're going to be more than 60 in order to guarantee a crit. So this, to me, is going to be really, really important if you actually decide to play Asuma Miya by himself without another attack technique buffer. And obviously, just the skill in general itself, increasing attack technique by 35% and defense technique by 25% is also just a very, very strong buff by itself, okay? Remember, your main stat from potential slot 6 is only 15% attack technique. This essentially is going to be equivalent of, let's say, 3 potential slots worth of stats buff, okay? So that's kind of why this is actually very, very strong buff just by looking at the numbers here. And obviously have this additional effect of guarantee your team is always able to trigger based on this condition of 60% or more. And then the last effect is that your first serve is going to have both guaranteed to be crit and also disable your opponent from using both spike and also receive ultimate at the same time. So that's a quick rundown of Asuma Miya's kit, but now here comes the big question: should I actually summon for him? Now, Asuma Miya is definitely very, very good because essentially his own kit allowed him to give about 65% attack technique, which is higher than any other character able to give out there. And if you actually play him in an optimal team with his team bonds, etc., he can actually go as high as around 90% attack technique buff for your whole team. And that's absolutely amazing because normally in the damage formula, the technique portion tend to be the one which is hardest to buff up. So the fact that Asuma Miya is essentially the best technique buffers out there that basically have him an insane value when you try to buff up the damage for your spikes, for all of your actions essentially. Because remember, this is not just attack technique, this is also defense technique at the same time. On top of that, if you actually do have him as a skill tool, this cooldown reduction is also absolutely amazing. It can actually open up loads of possibility. It can potentially, for example, allowing you to bring 3 spikers and reduce that down to only needing to bring 2 spikers instead, and then open up a whole slot on your team in order to for totally different roles, etc. So this is also going to be a crazy strong value for Asuma Miya. So just with those two things together, you might be thinking, oh, Asumi is going to be an easy must summon character then. Well, there's going to be one unfortunate thing, which is that in order for those two conditions to actually work, you do have this requirement of requiring your players to have a weight that's less than 30%. Now, I did say that this is actually a very, very relaxed condition because this only happened at the start of turn, whilst a lot of characters only buff up their awareness in the middle of turn. So whilst this is relaxed threshold in theory, there's one major obstacle in reaching this, and that is going to be SP Oikawa, because SP Oikawa's own passive ability can actually give your whole team permanently 100% awareness. Or even if you just get one stack of leading, you will already end up with 40% awareness for your whole team during any point in the match. So immediately you can already see there's a massive contradiction between SP Oikawa and SP Atsumu, and that's going to make your decision very, very easy. If you already have SP Okawa and you actually plan to actually have him in your team for a long time, then there's absolutely no need for you to summon for Asumiya, because then essentially Asumiya's kit is going to be completely compromised by Okawa's own effect. Now, if you already have SP Okawa, however, you just play summon for him because he's a fan favorite, or you only plan to play him in your power team and you want a different kind of team for other speciality without using Okawa, then fine. In those kind of cases, you can still summon for Asumiya for the scenarios where you don't plan to play Okawa. However, I guess the main takeaway thing here is that if you already have Okawa, do you really want to spend so much resources on another setter, even though he's very, very good, but just basically at a complete opposite end to Okawa, and the two just simply doesn't fit together on the same team, okay? So that, to me, is probably the biggest obstacle in deciding on whether or not you actually want to go for Asumi. But other than that, everything else about his kit is actually going to be really, really good. Now, there's also, I guess, another thing to consider, although this is a bit more down in the future. But let's say if you do actually plan to save up for camo duels, then maybe resourcing could be another thing for you to consider as well. But purely from character kit point of view, I still think the biggest decision is on whether or not you first of all have Okawa, and second of all, if you do have Okawa, how do you plan to actually team build, considering that the two are going to have totally different play styles, okay? So that's going to be my thoughts on SP Asumia, and also whether or not you should be summoning for him. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section.